morning. Wow, that was terrible. No coffee yet. I'm gonna try one more time. Good morning. I just want the good morning. You don't have to clap yet. I haven't done anything. We'll save that part. So I want to welcome all of you to the S Universe. I want to welcome all of you to the second Singularity International Summit in Milan. And I would like to ask you, how many of you were here with us last year? Get a show of hands if you've been here before. Okay, so a pretty good representation. So welcome back to all of you. And to those of you who are new, a warmest welcome. This is an exciting moment for us. It's an exciting moment for Singularity to be back in Italy. We're just celebrating our 10-year anniversary, and we're happy to be kicking off our next 10 years with our partners at SingularityU Italy, whom you'll be hearing more about as we go. And as we look out into the world, we can actually see accelerating change, that things are looking dramatically different. So the good thing about that is it means that we're on to something. We're right about this whole future of accelerating change thing. That said, it also means that we're looking at novel challenges, new threats emerging into our world as this future is taking shape, and we are facing mounting performance pressure and mounting pressure to adapt. And that's what we're going to be talking about a lot here over the next 2 days. As I said, it's an exciting time for Singularity. It's also an exciting time for Italy. You all have articulated as a nation a bold vision of the Italian National Plan for Industry 4.0, a new economy premised on digitalization, education, and strategic collaboration. And you've already made strong progress in those endeavors, which is a good start. That's definitely encouraging. It's important to have a shared goal and a vision for the future. But realizing that vision is going to require more than bold thinking and a future focus. That vision is going to have to be responsive to an evolving context, and a context that is evolving at an accelerating pace. And as we're here today, I really want us to be putting new questions to those visions that we have for the future. I want us to be challenging assumptions. And frankly, at the end of 2 days with Singularity, you're not going to walk away with all of the answers, but hopefully you will walk away with better questions and a new awareness of possibilities. We're going to be doing a lot of divergent thinking, where we consider all of the things that we might do, all of the possible futures we might create, before we begin to converge on, of all those things I could do, what are the things that I should do? And then what are the things that we will do? Of those possible futures, which are our preferred futures? Which are the ones that we want to inhabit? And then, we're presented in the present as it becomes the future, with a fascinating lab and the exponential technologies to accelerate learning by tightening feedback loops and de-risking experimentation and entrepreneurship. And if everyone out there right now is asking the question about the future of small to medium enterprises, Italy is already, just to take one question, a step ahead in exploring the possibility of the adaptability of networked SMEs. Now, anytime I kick off an event like this, I often think of a conversation I had a while back with one of our faculty members who had just returned from another conference on the future of governance and cybersecurity. And he had met with a group of world leaders in those fields. And about halfway through the conference, one of them leaned over to him and said, you know, I feel like we're finally having the conversations that we should have been having 10 years ago. And so today, I would like for all of us to resolve to have the conversations that we need to have to create the future we want to inhabit, a future that we'll be proud of. I would like us all to resolve to not find ourselves years down the line wishing that we'd had further reaching, more generative, and more important conversations when we actually had the time to get together. So let's have those conversations here. Let's have them in this room. Let's have them today. Because this is a remarkable group of people, and this is a powerful network. And there's a lot of research coming out now. Jeffrey West's book on scale is one great place to see this, about the scaling law that drives innovation. right? And that there actually is something to getting large groups of people together and ideating, right? This is one of the things that drove the growth of the city-state and the sustenance of larger and larger systems throughout history. So I think first, when we're thinking about the resources we have to make this program truly remarkable, consider all of you who are in this room, a room full of like-minded change makers. Now I'll ask you, how many of you are sitting next to a friend? How many of you thought you were until the person next to you didn't raise their hand? For all of you who were not, which hopefully is most of you, this represents a fantastic opportunity, right? To explore a mind other than your own in conversation, to leverage their experience, and to see what you might be able to create together as you learn from one another. You have a fascinating group of people in this room, and it is a powerful network. I also would like to thank, as we are kicking off, our partners in SingularityU Italy who have made this event possible, and of course, our sponsors. Our title sponsor, PwC, our main sponsors, INI and IBM Cloud, our mobility partner, BMW, and our future of work partner, the Athena Security. Now, a few notes on the event, which I'm contractually obligated to give you before we really get into it. First, that all of these partners have come together to create something that is a pretty unique experience, and that's what we aim to do. SingularityU Italy and Singularity University are both benefit corporations, which means that we are rigorously measured in aiming to create a positive impact on society and environment, and that we balance that as a core goal along with profit. So it is a unique organizational structure that you're going to be hearing more about in the course of these 2 days. This is also a sustainable event, right? We're trying to make the world a better place. We're trying to co-create a better tomorrow. We are committed to that endeavor all the way down to the t-shirts that you have received, which are organic cotton. The lanyard that you're wearing right now is made with recycled fabric. Excess food from the event will be distributed to those in need by a program partner. And the water is provided by a purpose-driven Italian startup called Water with a Mission. They're also a benefit corporation, and every bottle consumed here supports a donation of 100 liters of clean water in areas with critical lack of access or infrastructure. And of course, because it's 2018 and you're at a big conference, we also have an app. So if you have not downloaded and joined the app yet, and the little pamphlet you received in your bag, there is a QR code which you can scan so that you can join the app, which will allow you to further participate in the event. You can connect with one another, you can post to social media, you can use the app to submit questions to our speakers during the Q&A. And that's something I also want to encourage you to make the most of, to make this a participatory experience. These speakers are now part of your network, now that you are part of the S universe. And today, you're going to be hearing from some of the most outstanding minds of our time.
It will be a wonderful ride for all our minds. Oh, my presence is puzzling you. You're asking yourself, who is she? Why is she here? There's nothing wrong with being curious. Wanting to understand is the precise reason why you're all here today.
Well, to expect the unexpected is a kind of foundational rule of Singularity University. So, what are you and why are you here today?
My name is Yuma, which means to shine, like the light that defines me. And it also means one, a singular name for this SingularityU Italy context. And my role here is to scan the trillions of questions that will explode during the speeches and turn them back to the speakers.
Holy wow, trillions of questions. Well, that sounds very useful, Yuma.
I know. Asking the right questions is the best way to get the right answers. It helps me to be ahead.
Ahead. I see what you did there. So what is ahead of us, Yuma?
Oh, but we're not here to predict the future, but to invent it. Awaiting you are 2 days packed with intense, mind-blowing, and empowering content. We should really get going, Jeff. I'll be back anytime a Q&A moment is required. For now, I'll leave you to your introduction speech. Ahead we go.
Ahead we go then. Thank you, Yuma. All right, well, there's that. She can hear you. Go ahead, don't be shy. All right, well, that's going to be a tough act to follow, but now it is my time to spend a little bit of an orientation session with all of you. And I'm going to try to set this up so that if you have been here before, this will be a little bit of a refresher and maybe build on some things that you have heard in the past. And if you are new to the Singularity Universe, then this will give you kind of a primer on how we think about the future, how we think about emerging technologies, and how you can make the most of your experience here. We're going to establish some conceptual vocabulary and maybe even some durable heuristics for thinking about the future. Now, I know that anytime I get, say, 900 of my new closest friends together for a conversation about the future, the first thing that everyone wants is certainty, right? This is a fundamental human tendency. We all want to know what's next. We all want to know what happens. We want to know the story. We want to know where it's going and how it's all going to play out and whether maybe there's something that we can use to our advantage. We want laws. We want to know. The difficult thing is that one of the few things that we do know with confidence about that future is that it's going to be characterized by increasing uncertainty, variability, complexity, and ambiguity. But for all of that uncertainty, for all of that complexity, that doesn't mean that it's entirely unknowable. There are things we do know, and we do have a set of pretty reliable heuristics, some of which have been posited by the world's foremost futurists and future thinkers. And if you are one of the world's foremost futurists, you come up with something, and people sometimes like to call it a law. The thing to keep in mind as we talk about these laws for future thinking is that most of these are not laws of physics. They're not ironclad written somewhere in the universe. They're keen observations of human behavior. And when we talk about exponential technology, when we talk about emerging possibilities, it's critical to remember that exponential technology is exponential because we make it so. That everything that we're going to see is the result of aggregated human decision-making, right? So let's kick off. We're going to start at the beginning. I know you came to talk about the future, but we're going to start way back. And I actually am going to give you a law for this first one. And this is the law of accelerating returns. And this actually does seem to be a law that is something immutable in systems as old as life itself. So this concept, this idea of accelerating returns, comes to us from Ray Kurzweil, and is often called Kurzweil's Law of Accelerating Returns. And his singular insight, and this may be one of the most profound things that we can share with you, is that technology develops in an evolutionary system. And when a new process, or a development, a strategy, a technique, a tool, proves to be adaptive, it is propagated forward through additional research and development and iteration. And this, it turns out, is a characteristic of any evolutionary process. And that we see, as Kurzweil wrote in The Singularity's Mirror, exponential growth as a feature of any evolutionary process. And technology itself is a prime example. And what Ray realized is that technology, or particularly the pace of technological change, advances at least exponentially, not linearly. And it has been doing so since the advent of technology, and indeed since the advent of evolution on Earth. So in any system, as something proves adaptive, that thing is carried forward. And it has the benefit of building on everything that came before and being able to draw effectively on the best, most adaptive characteristics and tools in that system, such that we produce an accelerating feedback loop. And once that thing becomes exponential, then you can have compounding exponentiality as these processes converge. We're going to unpack this, but I want to start by showing you a plot that Ray actually did. This is a scatter plot where on one axis, you have time, and on the other axis, you have population in millions. And the points plotted there are technological milestones. Obviously, this leaves a lot out, but I think there's still enough to make the point. And what I want to draw your attention here is on the extreme right side of the graph, you start to see a much higher concentration of technological milestones, of innovation, such that it starts to look and maybe even feel like everything is indeed happening all at once. And what this means is that as we've gone through time, the rate of discovery, of innovation, of solution architecture is itself increasing. And it's increasing exponentially. Now, there are two ways to read this, I believe. One is that sustaining systems for larger populations over time has required more innovation. That's the only way we've been able to make it work, is by increasingly adapting ourselves to complex challenges and building more complex systems to sustain life and economy and society and polity. The other way to read this, though, is that as you have grown the population, as you've grown the community of solvers, and you have more people with more tools working as innovators to solve problems, you've seen more solutions emerge. And that is the thing that I'm the most excited about. This idea that we're growing the community of solvers as we democratize access to technology, and that even as we're presented with new problems, we're more likely to be able to arrive at a solution that is equal to that challenge. And I think taken together, this suggests something really important about the power of ideas and the increasing pace of innovation as an emergent property of the interconnected feedback loops in our complex sociocultural system. And now, the world that we're moving into is indeed digital. It's networked at the global level, it's complex, and it is the basis of this exponential future, friends. And that means that we're going to see not only more innovation, but also an increasing rate of exponential emergent threats and challenges. And part of what I want to do is convince you that every one of those challenges is also an opportunity on the flip side. But this pace of change, this is never going to slow down. If you look out in the world today and you feel a little bit overwhelmed, this is the slowest it's ever going to get. So we have two opportunities here. One choice is to live forever bewildered. The other is to learn to think differently, right? And we can consider, as Gary Hamel, a management theorist, recently said, that among the most profound challenges today is to build organizations that can change as fast as change itself. So this is a challenge at the human level, at the organizational level, at the society level. And I believe that that challenge is one of adaptability. And to be adaptable is going to require us to take the long view. But the truth is that it's hard to take the long view, and harder still when that involves breaking away from linear thinking. Linear thinking is something that has served us very well as a species for a very, very long time. Tens of thousands of years, we were able to thrive basing future expectations on past performance, past experience. We had this idea that every new day, the sun would come up and it would shine down on a world that looked more or less like the day before, and the day before that, and that change would be gradual and incremental. But in an exponential world of accelerating change, each successive tomorrow will be radically more different from its respective yesterday, which makes taking the long view extraordinarily difficult. And that brings us to our second law. This is Amara's law, and this is Roy Amara, who was the president of the Institute for the Future. And Amara said, we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. And as a colleague of mine recently pointed out, this is something that is particularly problematic because even when we know it's true, it's still true. I think of something like the smartphone. You probably remember when you got your first one and you thought, this is going to change my life. I'm going to be so productive. I'm going to get organized. In the short run, it was going to change everything. And you might have been wrong. But in the long run, probably very few of us appreciated just how dramatically transformative these technologies would prove to be. And that brings us to our first exponential that I really want to talk about, and Moore's Law. This is the exponential that most people are familiar with. Raise your hand if you've heard of Moore's Law. Keep your hand up if you feel like you could articulate it in front of 900 people. Yeah, okay, good. Some of you. Excellent. If I get it wrong, you can rush the stage. So the idea here, Gordon Moore realized some 50, 60 years ago that the price performance of computing was roughly doubling every year and a half, right? And we can see that in the rate at which our devices have progressed, while also becoming cheaper. And computing has become abundant. Here's a classic example where on the left-hand side you have iPhone 5S. Several generations back, an iPhone that probably none of you would be caught dead with at this point. You can get one of these on eBay for about $120 US today. And on the right-hand side, you have the Cray 1 supercomputer. Circa 1976, the fastest computer in the world, cost about $33 million US. You probably know which one of these is faster, more powerful, but you might not know by just how much. It can be surprising. And the thing to consider here is, what are you doing with all this computing power? Right? It has been said, it's become almost a cliche in Silicon Valley to say that you're sitting on, or right now some of you are playing with, more computing power than NASA had collectively when they put 2 men on the moon in the 1960s. Some of you may, or at least you know someone, who may have been the person who's dropped the collective computing power of NASA in a toilet at a nightclub on a Friday night. And we don't think much about it. But again, the question is, what are you doing with all that power? And what are you doing with the knowledge that everyone else that you know is also carrying around that power, and that it's all networked? There's tremendous opportunity here in abundant computing, in what Moore's Law implies. And Kurzweil pointed out that Moore's Law is actually only the 5th paradigm of increasing price performance of computational power that goes back 110 years, more or less unbroken, smoothly progressing. This is a log scale. That's why it looks more like a line than that exponential curve, but it's quite steep. And the thing to know is it doesn't just apply to computation. It applies to everything that is able to leverage abundant computing power. All of these technologies, because they are riding Moore's Law, they are themselves exponential. And when we combine a few of these through that process of combinatorial innovation, we take two pieces and we make something new. The next generation of technology, this is where we see accelerating returns. We see an exponential rate that then is increasing with another exponential rate piled on top of it. And this is allowing us to put intelligence into everything and to begin to really see and be entirely different in this world, and to change our understanding of ourselves, our interactions, and our future. Here in Italy, just in this past year, AI researchers are unlocking secrets of the past, where they've been applying computer vision and a deep learning neural network trained to identify the characters in medieval texts to the digital transcription of the Vatican's secret archives, where there's rumored to be something like 85 kilometers of shelved files. Don't know what they're going to find, and I don't know that we'll actually want to know all of that, but the fascinating thing here is that exponential technology is not only unlocking all kinds of new data sets, but it's making old data usable in new ways. It's unlocking vast potential to understand our past, and of course to solve our present problems.
An Athena camera picks up dangerous objects and dangerous motions, such as someone pulling out a gun. It can then alert.
That should be muted, so I can talk over it. But what you see in this video is a startup called
An Athena
Security.
camera picks up
It's called Athena Security, and they have a machine learning layer that they have built on a security system so that it can identify in real time emergent threats where you have someone carrying a gun or other weapon, even on grainy security camera footage. And it can be integrated into a security system such that it can alert the police, it can set off an alarm, and it can do all of this faster and in a less disruptive fashion than, say, that human cashier there. And it is operating with a very, very high degree of accuracy now, something like 99%. And also, even if it were wrong, it's still much safer than leaving this up to the humans alone. And in the United States, I wish this weren't the case, but Athena just secured its first client for this new technology, which is a high school. So it is a solution to a depressing problem, but a very difficult nut to crack. And we're finding new ways of approaching those challenges. And that is the thing to consider. We also, in addition to being able to solve present challenges, we're able to use these new technologies to design our future. And now it's nice and muted, so you guys can watch this gunman in silence. But you get the idea. At this point, security is being alerted. The police are already on their way. Doors can be locked automatically as well. There we go. Now, we also, as I said, are able to leverage not only intelligence beyond the human, but perhaps even creativity beyond the human. This is an example of a generative design algorithm, where you have an artificial intelligence system that is given parameters to satisfy for a design. And it starts to come up with ideas that would satisfy that design, that might not look like something a human would come up with. These are prototypes for a drone or a quadcopter. And this is a partnership between Autodesk Dreamcatcher algorithm and DJI drones. And as you can see, a lot of these don't look like anything that a human would design. And the thing to know is that we're getting into this world where we can leverage this superhuman intelligence and creativity much more quickly than most of us realize. This exponential future is here. And yet, it wasn't all that long ago that we were here. This was the 1980s. And now, you're all sitting on more collective computing power than NASA had when they put 2 men on the moon. And so the question, exponential thinkers, especially those of you who've been here before, is what happens next? It took you 25 years to get from that to this. Now you all have one of these. What happens with this thing? Where do we go from here? I see some of you looking at your Apple Watches. You're not thinking far enough ahead. Where do we go from there? What happens with this clunky mechanical interface? That's a real question. Okay, I heard in your head, you just might be right. That's what Elon Musk is thinking, right? He's imagining a sophisticated brain-computer interface where we entirely do away with this device as we've known it, and you can interact with the world more or less seamlessly, and that world responds and adapts in real time around you. That world learns. We have a world of IoT that's not just a connected fridge or a thermostat, but everything. And we might debate all day whether or not this is something that we want as a possible future. But we might also consider that we may be closer to a time when we want to augment our human sense-making than we had realized. This is another AI example. This is a deep learning algorithm that has learned to synthesize footage of Barack Obama, given some audio. This came out of the Grail Lab at Washington last summer. Take a look and tell me if you can identify which one of these is the real President Obama.
Families refinance their homes to invest in things like high-tech manufacturing, clean energy, and the infrastructure that creates good new jobs. Not to mention the job training that helps folks earn new skills to fill those jobs. The results are clear.
Sometimes I really miss that guy, and I love being able to see 4 of them. So which one of those is the real one? I count on you people in the splash zone up here in the front row to give me some feedback. I hear top right, I hear top left, I see you debating with your neighbors a little bit. All of your answers are good, all of your answers are wrong. All of these videos are synthetic. Every one of these was created by the algorithm. And if you step back and you say to yourself, holy wow, it looks like we may be on the verge of a real epistemological crisis, a moment where we no longer know what we know and how we know it, and we can't agree on what is real and what is true, you might be right. And that's a scary precipice to be standing on. But I will also tell you, as Ray Kurzweil would suggest, that a solution is already perhaps emerging, that we may be able to innovate our way out of this challenge as well. There was a researcher in Germany named Andreas Roschler who, in the spring, designed something called the exception net, using another deep learning algorithm, a neural network, and this one was trained to spot fake video. and it can do it much better than any human can. So perhaps there's hope there. But the question then is, do we want to be trapped in a cycle where we are forever having to engineer ourselves out of problems of our own creation because we didn't think through where our technologies might be headed? And that's a profound question to sit with for a little while. And I would suggest that we need to be thinking about what it means with these exponential technologies as we're creating non-neutral feedback loops. This is another law of sorts from one of my heroes. This is Donna Haraway, who is a cultural critic and techno-philosopher and futurist. And she says, technology is not neutral. We're inside of what we make, and it's inside of us. We're living in a world of connections, and it matters which ones get made and unmade. This is basically taking Melvin Kranzberg's law that technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral, and dragging it through Marshall McLuhan and the Toronto School with these ideas that when we design new tools, we're designing the tools that will design us, right? That we are in these feedback loops, and that we need to get better at thinking through where they're going to put us and what they're going to create, what the unintended consequences will be. Peter Diamandis has suggested a framework that he calls the 6 Ds for thinking about the effects of disruptive exponential technologies, where you start with something being digitized, right? We know when we digitize a thing that it unlocks new capabilities. Now that thing can be copied freely. It can be distributed. It can be hacked. It can be reprogrammed. We can cut it up. We can reassemble it. We can recombine it and make it do new things. And once something is digitized, once it's operating with an information layer, it is riding Moore's law, and it is leveraging abundant computing. And it gets on this exponential curve, this wave where we move from deceptive, where we're underperforming the linear expectation. We're thinking, it's going to change everything, smartphone, but it doesn't do it immediately. But eventually it crosses a critical point, a threshold, that my colleague David Roberts likes to call the good enough line. And that is the point where this technology that we've introduced maybe introduces a viable market alternative. And then that thing proves to be not just a little bit better, but entirely different. And it renders the previous thing irrelevant. And that is the point of disruption. And what does disruption look like? Well, Peter suggests that we see dematerialization, demonetization, and democratization. And that's what we're going to be looking at in all these examples through the technologies we cover this week. You're going to be seeing these, so look for them. Because exponential thinking is really a habit of mind. It's learning to see new possibilities and to anticipate further steps ahead, and to understand that each step is not linear, but it is exponential. Each step takes you exponentially further than the previous one did. A great example of this is the cost of DNA sequencing. Right? We've been able to sequence the full genome for a while now, but the first time we did it, in 1997, it cost $3 billion, and it took more than a decade. This was the endeavor of the nation state, right? Now, 9 years later, when Gordon Moore did this, when he had his genome sequenced, we lopped off a couple of those zeros. Now we're down to $350,000. Note, this only took 9 years. If you had done a linear increase, a linear increase in price performance and said, every year we're going to cut $25 million off the price, it would have taken 108 years to get to this point. But in an exponential world, it only took 9. Now we go a little bit further. 2014, we're knocking on the door of commercial viability. You can start to imagine use cases. You can start to imagine whole businesses built on this thing, right? And then in 2017, Illumina Systems shipped what they promised would deliver the $100 genome, right? I'll ask you all now, how many of you have had your genome sequenced? A few, yeah? I did this year as well. I would love to see all of you back together in 2 years and to ask you again. I imagine there'll be a lot more hands, and there might be some people who don't have a hand up because they just don't realize that their genome has been sequenced. But think about where this goes. If it's $100 now, does it stop there? And then what does that produce as we continue to see disruption, dematerialization, demonetization, democratization? Well, we might get here. We're already here. This is a handheld sequencer from Oxford Nanopore Technologies, and this is real-time, portable DNA, RNA sequencing in the field. This is the MinION. right? So we can already see this. My colleague Raymond McCauley, our chair of biotechnology at Singularity, likes to joke that if we're at $100 this year for the genome, a couple more years, we're going to be at $12, and it's going to be cheaper than getting a pizza delivered. A couple years after that, it's going to be cheaper than flushing the toilet. At which point, your genome may be sequenced very frequently. Now, what can we do with abundant genetic information? Well, we can start to build things with it, right? We're able already to bioprint tissue. These are heart cells, right? This is basically a heart organoid that is representative of someone's DNA. And we could use something like this. We could take these 3D bioprinted cells and we could put them in a nice moment of convergent technology in an array of microfluidic chips and combine computing, genomics, big data, AI, and machine learning, and we have a whole new way of doing drug development and then personalized medicine that is radically more precise and radically cheaper than the way that we've always done this in the past. This is hugely disruptive technology for a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if we can design little heart cells for humans, we can design all kinds of other things too. There's a company called Modern Meadow that is out there right now cranking out synthetic leather that feels and performs just like real leather, but it's produced by yeast. Yeast fermentation. The yeast has been hacked to biofabricate leather. And what you're doing there is you're producing an animal product without the animal. You're decoupling animal from environment, animal product from environment. This has huge potential and huge implications for how we live with our environment, how we sustain ourselves and our planet. You're going to be hearing more about the ideas of cellular agriculture and new ways of producing food and meat cleanly from Mark Post later on today. But for now, I want to sit us back here because this is really where we are, and this is why this stuff is so important. All of the technologies you're going to be hearing about this week, they're moving out of this deceptive growth phase, and we're at this critical point where we're now moving into an era of amazement and chaos. And I'm hoping all of you will join us at Singularity in working to maximize the amazement and minimize the chaos. And to do that, we need to think about what are the actual uses of these tools. What do we want to do? If we're at the point where we can redefine what it means to be human, we can engineer life itself at the molecular level, what should we do with it? What should we build? And on that, I want to touch on bugs that we see in our system, in our world. We live in a world of immense beauty and inspiration, but it has no shortage of problems. Right? There is no shortage of problems to solve out there. And in the vein of problem solving, I like Linus Torvalds. There are things about him that are not amazing, but he has a great maxim that's been known as Torvalds Law. He's the founder of Linux, and he said, initially with reference to open source software, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. Right? If you have enough people working on this thing, we'll figure out the best way to do it. We'll patch, we'll do whatever we need to do to debug. I believe that this applies to that growing community of solvers. As we're getting more technologies into more hands, we're able to do more, we're able to come up with better solutions to the problems that really matter. This team of global entrepreneurs for a startup called Magic Water, right now are leveraging family-scale solar power and hydrophilic materials to capture water, moisture from the air. They're capturing moisture from the air to produce water, just sucked out of the air. And what they did in summer of 2017, they hacked together a system using existing materials. They took a solar panel, they took these hydrophilic materials and a filter, and they were able to produce in California 10 liters of water in an afternoon. Just sucked out of the air. The idea being here, if you have energy from the sun, which is abundant, and you have air, which is also abundant, fortunately, then you have everything you need to create what has always been a very scarce resource: water, clean water. And what they're envisioning is clean water at a cost of less than 1 cent per liter and bundled finance so that this can all work off-grid. Right now, they're developing their next prototype in Kenya. to address drought conditions in Kenya. And those drought conditions are not unique. That is a problem that we're going to be seeing more and more of in our world with climate change. And this is transformative technology. And this is a potential solution to a very, very difficult problem. But they've seen a possibility. They've seen an opportunity. And they've also seen the possibility to scale. Right? They understood that where this is going is leveraging another exponential. Right? We've been able to produce electricity from the sun's energy for a very long time, but for a long time, it was not something that ever seemed market viable or scalable. But those prices have declined, and they're going to continue declining. In 2017, we were able to create a solar cell thinner than a human hair that could sit on a soap bubble without popping it. And that's a cool feat of engineering, but part of what that means is that we are going to be able to produce clean energy at very low marginal cost anywhere that we have that sunlight. You're going to be hearing more about the future of energy later, but I want you to be considering, what does that mean if that becomes a platform for creative problem solving? What kinds of solutions can we build on it? And that sort of question, what does this mean? How might we build with this? How might we do better? How might we solve these global grand challenges? That's an aspect of mindset, and this is what I want to close with. The idea of mindsets and becoming. There's a pioneering educational and cognitive psychologist at Stanford named Carol Dweck, who wrote a book about 10 years ago called Mindset. And she differentiated between the fixed mindset of people who believe that they basically are who they are. I'm not good at math. I can't learn to code. I'm never going to dance well. I am who I am. Versus what she called the growth mindset. People who believe that they could learn to do the thing. They could adapt. They could rise to the challenge. They could solve the problem. And they would even embrace the process of getting there. They saw value in stretching themselves. And Dr. Dweck started looking at children, and she noticed that children who exhibited the growth mindset had much better outcomes as creative problem solvers than did those who exhibited the fixed mindset. That was a fascinating thing. She started to look at adults, and she saw the same thing. That it seemed to be suggestive of longer-term outcomes and success, this growth mindset. And I want to posit to all of you that in an exponential world of accelerating change, linear thinking effectively is the new fixed mindset. It's like you're going nowhere at all because you're not moving fast enough for it to matter. And so what we need to be doing in our time together is really thinking about how we embrace the growth mindset, the exponential thinking, the abundance mindset, and then how we connect with each other to build a network to achieve impact at scale. That's ultimately what this is about. And I would argue that it starts with asking new questions about the future. I would argue that it starts with being willing to let go of the official future, of what Christian Cruz has called the official future that every organization has. You have an idea of what the world is going to be like, and that's what you're operating against, right? You design your business plan and strategy based on assumptions that you've had about the future. And some of those assumptions have probably been sitting for a long time. Maybe you have a 5-year plan that's not responsive enough to an adaptive context, right? And so I want to ask all of you to take some time this week to kill that official future for the organization or for yourself, to take that thing off the shelf and interrogate it. Bring it down and see if it holds, see if it's good enough, see if it is adaptive, see if you're having the right conversations with the right people to build the future you want to, and embrace the possible future, right? So that we can understand our preferred futures and we can start to co-create those. And with that, I want to thank you all for spending some time with me this morning, and I want to give you a little bit of an idea of what's next, of where we're headed. We're going to continue with this theme of mindsets and creative problem solving, and learning to see and to do and to be different, and to do those things differently. We're going to be revisiting that idea throughout the program, learning to think exponentially as a habit of mind, and making a practice of exploring possible futures, and beginning to see that with every emerging challenge, there's also an emerging opportunity. It's the flip side of that coin. Now, I mentioned a moment ago the founders of Magic Water, who I believe are true heroes. And one of the things that's amazing to me is that none of those people are famous yet. And that's kind of the point. It's that they're doing something, they're seeing something transformative, but it's not because they're with Google or IBM or Amazon or another organization that seems to be posited to leverage emerging technology to remake the world. Instead, they're people who saw a problem and saw an opportunity. They're people who practice the abundance mindset in such a way that it might even make Peter Diamandis sit up and say, damn, I wish I'd thought of that idea. And they've harnessed exponential technology to take something, as I said, something that is abundant, the sun's energy and air, to produce something that has been critically scarce, clean, affordable water. And this is transformative, but it also begins with an act of imagination. It begins with a creative impulse to address that problem. And for the next two speakers that we have in our morning block, they're going to be talking with you all about seeing differently, thinking differently, problem solving, and creativity. You're going to meet Vadana Casella, who is our Director of International Summits at SU. She's one of the architects of our global community. She's worked with partners like Diego Guillermita and David Orban, who are our partners at SingularityU Italy, to educate and inspire more than 40,000 people around the world through events like this. And her career has taken a decidedly non-linear path to this point. And I think that brings a unique perspective to the theme of learning to see and to do differently. And then before that, you're going to meet Tim Hartford. Tim is a behavioral economist, a BBC radio and TV presenter, and an award-winning columnist for the Financial Times. You might know him. He's been described by the New Statesman as perhaps the best popular economics writer in the world. And he has a knack, I believe, for looking at familiar things in unfamiliar ways. And he's a practitioner of changing minds and shifting mindsets. So please open your minds now and give a very warm welcome to Tim Hartford.